dependency will increase dramatically in the coming decades, but still, China is here consuming about 6% of total global oil amount, whereas the United States is by so far the largest. And on a per capita basis, ladies and gentlemen, let me show you. This is India, this is China on a per capita basis. Okay, look at Kuwait, United States, Japan, and all these. This is where we are. China consumes about 1/14 or 1/12, depending on the statistics, of a North American per capita consumption in terms of energy. And India is much less in that regard. So just imagine if every 1.3 billion Chinese consumes as much as an American, I think the global energy output has to increase by about over 60%. The water consumption, if they consume 6 times more, like us, then the world has to increase 55% of water supply. Impossible. Just impossible situation. But it's coming. They want a better life. They want fridge, and they want car, they want house, everything that consumes energy. And so they don't have enough domestic energy, so they have a going out strategy. They go out to consolidate in the traditional area of ASEAN. They compete and cooperate with India. I won't go to details on the world stage for energy search. Central Asia, Kazakhstan, very big partner. China put in billions of dollars with concessions with a new pipeline that just over a year ago opened, the only pipeline that not going through the former Soviet Union, and big time with Russia through railway upgrade, potential pipelines, and China having a bitter dispute with Japan over the East China Sea area, which is supposed to have large deposits of oil and gas. John Howard, Australian Prime Minister, conservative Prime Minister, just announced the largest deal in Australian history not long ago of 30-year contracted supply of natural gas at about $40 billion. I was there last summer. The Australians don't debate whether they will welcome Chinese investment in our country. They only debate how much more they can get. It's a very different picture from where we are in Canada. Africa, I'm coming back, but coming very big. Nigeria, Angola, these are what I call gambling type of investments. They're just going in to the war-torn countries and then build them and getting payback. Middle East, of course, Iran is now going through this nuclear crisis, and yet China is developing $70 to $100 billion oil development, field development contract. Sinopec, CNPC, large Chinese oil majors, all there. And of course, it makes a difference in the United Nations resolutions against Iran. High-tech environmental and conservation-related cooperation with EU, very strong. Going into Latin America, very big time on energy, although still at a relatively small scale due to the low starting point, but it's coming very, very fast. And Americans are very concerned. I'll talk about this maybe later if we have time. Also, the Chinese companies coming to Canada, if you followed, to buy on a moderate scale of oil sands and other resources, but there is concern, as we know, expressed by Canadians and Chinese companies. Sinuk's failed bid for the Unicol. That was just over a year ago, produced quite a bit of backlash on both countries. So China used to import more from Southeast Asian countries, but by the turn of the century, early 2000, you can see they're more into Middle East and Africa. And of course, Venezuela, coming from almost nowhere, now supplying huge amount of energy to China, Middle East, the fastest growing bilateral trade, all in the area, primarily in the area of oil and energy. And coming to Africa here, you can see the large amount of, by October 2006, Africa coming up very, very fast to supply China with this oil. So this chart is complicated, but if you look at where Africa is, now Africa total provide about 30% of China's oil imports. And last year, Angola surpassed the Saudi Arabia to become the largest oil supplier to China. And back in 2002, where was Angola? The civil war was just over. No Western countries were even daring to go in. China just went in with billions of dollars of aid, infrastructure development, in exchange for concessions on blocks of oil development. Now, Angola surpassed Nigeria, surpassed Saudi Arabia to supply China with large amount of oil. And so they are waiting to just get in there and to do all that. Anyway, give you a little bit of context, the Chinese dependence on the Middle East and Africa in the context of where India is and Japan is. By the way, India has 70%, over 70% of foreign oil dependency, where China has about 40%. And overall, China's energy, nearly 70% are still supplied by coal. And therefore, China actually, with all the hype, China, in fact, has much less vulnerable than that of the United States. U.S. has overall dependency of nearly 40% of total energy external dependency, where China has 6%. Okay, that's according to BP statistic. You have a quick question? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you buy oil in processed oil or crude oil?
Crude and product oil combined, total. Yeah, total imports. Okay, yeah. And okay, so those are again the sources of where China has its 2005, 2006. Give you some look at the countries under. So these are all the countries. Most of them are American, would call rock states or funny places that they don't want Chinese to invest. Actually, that's the language the Americans told the Chinese senior executives. We had this meeting last November when our Natural Resource Minister, Gary Long, was in Beijing for the World Heavy Oil Conference. It was Canadian and the Chinese organized it. I was there leading a U.S. Energy Council delegation. The state level number of senators and representatives went to China, and they want to engage the Chinese. So we took them to see the Chinese leadership, also the senior executives. China's National Offshore Oil Corporation, which failed to bid on the Unicol. The senior vice president virtually sat there, lectured this group of Americans for like an hour and a half, saying, we try to learn to play by the rules of free market, and when we try to buy your company, what happened? Your Congress blocked us politically, and gosh, we have $18 billion accumulated for a cash transfer. We were blocked. What do you think we're going to do? We're going to sit here without oil? So we have to go to Iraq. We have to go to Venezuela. We have to go to Nigeria. So these Americans were just sitting there and listen and say, gee, yeah, that's right. They say the money has to go somewhere because China needs energy. And so it comes back to kind of haunt Americans. These are state level senators, representatives. They read a statement saying, we think politically blocking China's efforts for market acquisition is a mistake, and we play no part into it. I mean, there are debates in the United States as well. But the thing is, the Chinese, I think, are having this appetite for energy, and it's almost unstoppable in a sense. But let me move on, stop quickly, maybe on the third point. I think every country and people talk about engaging China. Again, in Johannesburg last October, you have NEPAD, you have South African Institute of International Relations, Royal Society of Africa from London jointly organized this preparatory conference for the November China-Africa Summit. There was no consensus, I can tell you, what to do with China. All these small countries, every country has a different kind of trade and investment relationship with China. And some countries have energy export, some don't. So they can hardly formulate a position. And you could tell, President Mbeki's brother was there, and all these people come together. They couldn't figure out how to deal with China. So my point there is, I was talking about China's investment in Africa and its implication for local governance issues. China provides large amount of